So when we define fruits, we're very careful. We said, ripened ovary containing seed. Z. And every word there was really important. In this case, it's the part that I'd like to draw your attention to. And there are some fruits that you would, the dispersal unit, the individual thing here in this black berry with quotations around the berry part is not an ovary, but actually many ovaries. You recall there's something called an apocarpous gynoecium with several to many stigma-style ovary units on the receptacle of a single flower. And it's possible, therefore, for one flower to mature into many fruits. And if they're clustered together like this and dispersed as a unit, it's not an actual fruit because it's not an actual ripened ovary containing seeds. It's many ovaries containing seeds, each one a seed. And this is called, because this is from one flower, it's called an aggregate fruit. And raspberries and blackberries are nice examples of aggregate fruits. Let's take a closer look at the raspberries and blackberries. This one's a blackberry, and show you a kind of a subtle and fun difference to tell the two apart. Raspberries and blackberries, they look a lot alike. They are both aggregates of small fruits, and so that means they come from a single flower. You go back in time, each one of these would be a blossom. And when you talk about aggregate fruits, of which blackberries and raspberries aren't the only ones, you have to say a little bit more about it. You have to say what they're an aggregate of. So if you took each one of these little individual facets and swelled it up to the size of, say, a cherry, it would be a lot like a cherry. These are aggregates of druplets. Each individual facet is basically a fleshy fruit containing a seed with a sort of a hard covering around it. They're kind of crunchy when you eat them. So whenever you say you have an aggregate fruit, you got to say it's an aggregate of, in this case, druplets. And both of these plants, actually in the same genus, rubus, in the rose family, which is a family noted for, in most cases, having an apocarpous gynoecium. And look at the raspberry. Remember apocarpous gynoecium, we have several stigma-style ovary units on a receptacle, and when you pull the raspberry cluster of druplets, the receptacle stays on the plant. And so there's this, it's sort of like a thimble-shaped, there's a hollow space there, a little depression, a little crater. Contrary-wise, if you look in the blackberry, it's kind of stuffed in there, because when you pick a blackberry, the receptacle comes with it. That's why they're a little bit more crunchy to eat. So that's the difference between blackberries. When you pick them, the aggregate of druplets, the receptacle is included, whereas with raspberries, the receptacle stays on the plant. Otherwise, they're very, very similar in the same genus, rubus, in the Rosaceae. I think that I shall never see a poem as lovely as a tree. Whoever made that ditty was apparently very well versed in botany, because it turns out that the fruit of several members of the rose family is something called pome. And the pome is another fruit that kind of breaks the rules a little bit, actually a lot. Remember, the definition of a fruit is a ripened ovary containing seeds. And most of the time, the part that's fleshy, if it's fleshy, is the ovary. Not so with pomes. What I'd like you to address your attention to first about the pome is that definitely from an inferior ovary, we have a stem end, and I'm sure you've looked at the bottom of an apple. We'll take a closer up look, and it is you can see the remnants of stamens and the remnants of a calyx. Stem end, blossom end, inferior ovary. And if you were to slice the apple of science, you see the core of the apple. And the core of the apple, the neatly star-shaped, showing a origin with a syncarpous gynoecium with 5 carpels, and the seeds are in there. the ovary of the apple is deep within a lot of fleshy tissue. And this fleshy tissue is the hypanthium. Remember, inferior ovary, hypanthium kind of adnate or fused or very close to the ovary. In this case, that's the fleshy part. So instead of the fruit being a ripened ovary, the dispersal agent, the fleshy part, the principal part of this fruit is actually not a ripened ovary, but instead hypanthium, or maybe receptacle plus hypanthium. It's a little bit complicated, but it's a very unique kind of fruit found only in a subfamily of the rose family, and here it is. It's a poem. But while we're here, speaking of fruits that kind of break the rules and that aren't a ripened ovary containing seeds, what the heck on earth is a strawberry? And calyx. If this were a ripened ovary containing seeds, there would be seeds inside, which, as you probably know from having eaten strawberries, there's not. And there's something on the outside, sunk in these little pits, which, until now, you probably would say are seeds. They're not. They are, of course, fruits. They're one-seeded fruits that don't split open. They're achenes. So what the heck on earth do we have with a strawberry? What we have is the fleshy part is actually the receptacle of the flower. And it was an Apocarpus gynoecium with little stigmacyl over units arranged in a tight spiral, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, I'm not sure, can't count. And sunken into pits on that fleshy receptacle are the ripened ovaries, and they're achenes. And that's what a strawberry is. It's called an accessory fruit. The fleshy part is the receptacle. And the fruits, of which there are many, it's kind of like an aggregate fruit with another twist, the twist being the fleshy receptacle. And the fruits are, plural, are achenes sunken into pits on the outside of it. And that's a very unique kind of fruit type found in only one genus, the genus Frageria. In flower, Frageria looks an awful lot like a couple other genera in the Rosaceae, but then in fruit, they mature in different ways. Some of them with hooks and bristles on them, in the genus Geum. Some of them without any special adornment, in the genus Potentilla, they just fall to the ground. And then the genus Frageria, fleshy receptacle with the achene sunken into pits. And in flower, they look alike. In fruits, they show their differences. Strawberries, they're not berries. Well, I bet my neighbors are wondering why I'm crouched down in front of my house interviewing a pineapple. And the reason is because I want to tell you about one more type of sort of false fruit, you know, a fruit that breaks the rules of a ripened ovary containing seeds. And before, we learned about aggregate fruits, which are a lot of smaller fruits clumped together because they came from one flower, A1. That's how I remember that. It's compared with a multiple fruit, M, many. And this pineapple, you could look at it and think the same sort of things going on. Each one of these little facets is a berry. Soft fruit throughout with one or more seeds, and there's a bunch of them together. But if you go back in time to this pineapple, instead of seeing a flower with many carpels on it, an Apocarpus gynoecium, no, what you would find was a cluster of flowers, a head-like cluster of flowers, and each flower matures into a fruit, but they stay together at maturity. That's called a multiple fruit. Sometimes they look an awful lot like aggregate fruits. You got to go back in time, which we're going to do right now. It's amazing. And see whether or not it's derived from a flower or a cluster of flowers. One flower, aggregate fruit, cluster of flowers, multiple fruit. And what's exciting about this is here on the ground we have these sweet gum balls, and there's an awful lot of them. They annoy the neighbors. They annoy me. I try to rake them up. They keep falling down. And if you look really carefully, you'll see there's a lot of little individual facets. And if you were to analyze them, like I have done, or like the goldfinches do, or one-time white-winged crossbills, oh my God, that was a great day. There's seeds inside. They're dry, and there's seeds inside. And they split open to release those seeds along two little lines. So this is a group, and I haven't said what kind of group yet. Spoiler alert, it's a group of capsules. And so you wouldn't know without looking if this came from an Apocarpus gynoecium or an inflorescence. But if you go, here is the culprit, sweet gum tree. And if you look right here, I'm not sure how the focusing is, so I'm going to bend it down, and come on, camera, I want you to focus. There we go. Nope. Both of my hands are being used, so I can't manually focus. Let me see. Let me play around with this a little bit. I can change the focus point. It's windy. Let's break it off. I know the guy whose tree this is. He won't mind. So this is a cluster of flowers. This is an inflorescence. It's a head-like cluster of flowers. It's called the capitulum. And each one of those little sort of like yellow facets is a flower. So fast forward a bunch of months, and they look like that. Go back in time, and this is, ta-da, it's an inflorescence. So that is a multiple, and you got to say what it's a multiple of. It's a multiple of capsules. Sweet gum, multiple of capsules.